Hi there, and welcome to Blackhat Asia Day 1 Locknote. I hope you all had a great day of really insightful and educational presentations today. From what I saw, there certainly were a great mix of both deep technical talks, like the jump rocket, which went right and which was extremely detailed and gave one of my favorite comparisons, which was comparing Jop to cats with rockets strapped to their backs burning down castles, which is an awesome start to the day and just paints the picture for the rest of the day. That went right through to higher level talks, including the keynote by Troy Hunt and another by one of our own review board members around some of the risks to security researchers in surveillance states. I'm pleased to introduce you to some of the Blackhat Asia review board members who worked tirelessly for many months reviewing hundreds of very top quality submissions to bring you Blackhat Asia 2021. And from the outcomes that we've seen today, I think it really was a successful day. And you know, me personally, I got a lot of value out of that. So I'd like to introduce you to Pamela O'Shea, Mika Devonshire, Theodore Korochkin, myself, Ty Miller. And basically, I'd like to start by going around the table and allowing each of our review board members to just give a bit of a quick introduction about themselves so that you know their background, and also just provide a good insight into their highlight for the day and just hear from the review board, you know, their thoughts and some of the key takeaways that they had from Blackhat Asia Day 1. Please feel free to submit questions in the chat, and we'll get to as many of those as we can. So I'm going to hand across to Pamela as the first to give a bit of background and also just open up the conversation around what you found really useful for today.
Thank you, Ty. What a fun day it was today. I had a great time watching all these talks. My big problem was deciding which ones to choose because lots of them are on at the same time. Just to introduce myself, I'm Pamela O'Shea. I'm based in Melbourne. I specialize in pen testing. I enjoy web app hacking and radio hacking. So they're my two main interests. My favorite talk today, even though it was very hard to choose, but if I'm forced to choose one, it would be the Give Me SQL Injection talk by Chalpone IIS and SQL Server. It was a fantastic talk. It just kept going in terms of its impact. The research they did, the fuzzing they did, I can't believe they found all those bugs within a month or two of fuzzing. And the main idea behind the talk was that they obtained SQL injection, but I think, Ty, you mentioned today, it's like they've made SQL injection better again. So they've taken that further, and via, you know, older protocols like WebDAV, they're able to do a call out to a file hosted by a malicious actor, and that file actually grooms the heap, and then you can crash IIS and do other exploits based on that. And it was just a fantastic talk. And I loved that it's a legacy bug. It's been there for 20 years. They've gone all the way back to XP and proven it's still there in all 32 bits, 32-bit applications, and then it's one instance in the 64-bit. The other thing that was great, they just, you know, went through all of that, and then at the very end, they just kind of casually mentioned, oh, you can probably do privilege escalation through token kidnapping as well and maybe get system. So nice. And also they're working on local attack surface as well. So they mentioned they're already starting their research for their next Blackhat submission. So definitely brilliant researchers to watch there. I thoroughly enjoyed it and I almost needed popcorn. It was so much fun. So
yeah, look, I have to admit that was also one of my favorite. You know, I just think that it's got such an impact, and I remember seeing this talk when we were reviewing the submissions before Blackhat, and it was one that really caught my eye just because of the absolute critical nature of this, and also the question around, you know, how is Microsoft going to address this? You know, they don't even have, like, it's basically a legacy product that's distributed in every version of Windows.
Yeah,
like
and it's one of the issues with, you know, a wonderful corporation like Microsoft that gives us compatibility, but at the cost of, you know, technical debt and increased attack surface. So yeah, it was just wonderful research and nice to see, inspiring actually.
Yeah, it was interesting to see that, you know, they've sort of presented it, you know, through SQL Server and IIS because that was the critical attack vector, but because things like Microsoft Office and WScript and those sort of things also hook into database engines, and they support things like Jet, that, you know, they can potentially be vulnerable as well. It's just that that really wasn't the core target that they were going after. You know, and they revealed that through things like, you know, SQL Server, you could actually force, by using the open data source and open rowset commands, that you could actually force it to use the Jet engine to then connect to a remote database via a UNC path. So you can basically send it out to any remote database to then download malicious content and trigger the bugs. Yeah, really scary stuff.
It's really good.
Yeah. They also mentioned that I asked them during the talk if they'll be releasing the exploits for these, and they said not right now because they're still in talks with Microsoft, and just because of the criticality of these exploits and the fact that you can actually exploit them through SQL injection, means that they're obviously highly critical, but also Microsoft basically can't fix all of these. So, you know, releasing the exploits is obviously going to be a very bad thing, and you know, it'll be interesting. And one of the final statements they made was that you know, they believe these attacks are going to be around for a long time. So
definitely they'll be in the pen tester arsenal very soon, I think.
That's right, agreed. Yeah, so I think there's a lot of research to be done around that Jet engine again. Awesome. Thanks, Pamela. I'll jump over to Mika. Bit of background about yourself, and you've already done that today through your presentation, but bit of background again, and yeah, what did you find interesting from today?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Nice to be back at Blackhat virtually. My name is Mika. I work in digital forensics and incident response for a company based out of London, also in the US. And I've been a guest review board member for a few years for Blackhat Asia and US, primarily focused on incident response and network security. Outside of work, I have dabbled in teaching, was an assistant professor at Hong Kong University for a semester, and, you know, outside of that, also looking to do more teaching. Today was great. There were a ton of awesome talks. Hard to pick one that stood out all that much, but having spent time in several electric vehicles, I had to attend the talk on the Tesla supercharging stations, and found that talk to be fascinating. The protocols that they're fuzzing and looking to manipulate also kind of like open up the world of possibility. You know, there are thousands of these supercharging stations now, with so many automakers, you know, pledging to switch to all electronic vehicles in the next 5 years, 10 years. You have to think that, you know, is the security going to keep up? So I found that very thought-provoking. I found that they were very creative in how they kind of programmed this interplay between the charging station and the CAN bus. It seemed like a lot of research went into it, and also, you know, the possibilities are many. So it sounds like they'll be releasing some code where you can go kind of hyper program your own little, I forgot what they call it, maybe a CAN spy, little Raspberry Pi device, but found that to be impactful. And again, just with the number of charging stations growing, and the number of manufacturers that are going to keep making these, it just could be a really interesting field of research. And I always appreciate some of that tinkering. Outside of that, definitely a lot of good talks, and you know, always good to hear from the creator of Have I Been Pwned, of course. So I'll hand it over to Fyodor.
Hello, my name is Fyodor Yarochkin. Some people pronounce my last name as a chicken. There is no chicken in my last name. I'm a threat researcher with Trend Micro. I'm based in Taiwan. I'm originally like Russian, born in Ukraine, lived in Kyrgyzstan for a while, but I'm based in Taiwan for like past 20 years. So I'm quite familiar with the community here. Like any questions you have to, like original kind of like people, folks, trends, I'm probably the right guy to answer. So in terms of my expertise, I've both been doing penetration testing, like in the early days, also like in this region, and more recently I switched into like more like defensive technologies, like investigation of the crime cases. So my interest, when I look at the talks, might be slightly different. I'm not so much interested in offensive technologies, but also offensive and defensive techniques, or something that might be just innovative or like cross-domain. And in this slide, I think my favorite talk of the day would be the talk on the correlations between incidents and stock prices. The actual name of the talk is a walkthrough historical correlations between vulnerabilities and stock prices. I think like one of the main reasons why I picked up this talk is we all know that it's out there. If a company gets breached, there's probably going to be some economical impact on that company, right? But what Alessandro did in this particular case, he actually mathematically analyzed and showed with the diagrams and Excel sheets that this is what happens to your stock price when you get breached. Because sometimes you might be wondering, there is company A that got compromised and their stock price went while there's company B that had similar incidents and their stock price didn't go up, but even didn't go down, it even went up a little bit. Like, for example, the recent breach with Quanta, if you guys were paying attention, I was surprised. If you look at the stock price of Quanta, it didn't go down. It actually went up a little bit because the company, like less known company, actually got some exposure. So what I loved about this talk that Alessandro actually looked into what factors could potentially impact, or like the factors related to a breach could potentially impact, apologize, there is a cat on the background, impact the stock price fluctuation. So he had numbers, he had sheets, and yeah, that's like I had some questions. Maybe there would be other talks that I would put on top, but that's the talk that I would pick up as the most interesting one. Yeah. With this, I think I will hand the microphone to
that would be back to myself.
Pamela. Yep.
So so yeah, my name's Ty Miller. I'm the managing director of the security company in Australia called Threat Intelligence. So basically, been involved with Blackhat for a long time. Been training at Blackhat for this year will be the 11th year in a row, which is fantastic. And yeah, obviously on the review board, and really enjoy it. Gives us a lot of insights into some very cool research, especially all of the great ones that didn't actually make it through. We had a tough time arguing amongst ourselves to get those through. But I'd say that I think I really enjoyed the SQL injection one, but my pick today was the unprotected broadcasts in Android 9 and 10. and actually in Android 11 preview, which you got fixed before 11 came out. And yeah, that one just sort of shows you know, just some of the bugs that can be introduced into things like mobile devices, that where it was around associated with the privileged broadcast of intents, so basically communications between apps and the system, and you know, it demonstrated that ultimately unauthorized applications, so that there's trusted applications and there's untrusted apps which you basically pull down from the marketplace, as opposed to the ones that are pre-built into the phone itself. Yeah, and basically showed that unauthorized apps could send broadcast intent messages to other apps that are privileged on the device, and they were actually taken as trusted messages, either from the system or from trusted apps. And they could actually trigger arbitrary command execution in some of these to get system privilege access, access to log files, access to personally identifiable information. So some of the examples that were given, which were really interesting, was on the Google Pixel 3 and 4. One of the apps had phone access, so that was the privileges that they had, and a third-party app that from, you know, that you just install from the App Store could send intent messages causing file corruption and actually overwrite all of your phone contacts. And then there were some more malicious ones where one of the third-party apps, or one of the apps that's pre-installed was PerfDump, which any third-party app could actually send a message to and trigger arbitrary command execution, and, you know, ultimately just get full system access on your device. And, you know, do things like record screens or modify your keyboard to be a keylogger and those sort of things. And there was another one, which was the QMMI app that had system access. And, you know, any third-party app could basically send messages to get access to things like your the IMEI number, your Wi-Fi MAC address, your Bluetooth MAC address, your serial number. Just a whole host of problems were just introduced through this vulnerability, and that was just really impressive. It was just you know, some of these vulnerabilities just demonstrate the fundamental flaws that we've got in technology these days. But yeah, that was my pick. So on that note, you know, fundamental flaws in technology. I mean, Mika, you mentioned about the Tesla sort of talk, and self-driving cars sort of scare me, just because my entire business and pretty much a lot of this conference is based on the fact that, you know, bugs exist and we see them all the time, and it scares me that, you know, we can trust things like self-driving cars to take us around when we can't even fix up things like cross-site scripting. You know, I sort of, there was a few things that happened today that just sort of made me laugh, where, you know, I was watching when I got to a bite to eat in between sessions, and I saw my pool robot start eating my kids' pool toys. You know, it's automatically going around, and obviously not as intelligent as a self-driving car, but, you know, it's sort of working its way around my pool, started eating my kids' pool toys, and got one of them stuck, and it starts spinning in circles, going backwards and forth. And it just made me think of self-driving cars.
I was gonna say, is that your future self-driving car? Is the pool toy? And
yeah, well, you know,
someone else has been programmed to go catch it.
It's just like, you know, like, are they taking into account things like, you know, if my kids' toys get stuck in a piece of the car, you know, how does the software handle that?
This sounds like how
Yeah,
Skynet might get started, right?
self-driving
That's right.
cars, they actually scare me. I did programming of robotic devices in university, like where you take input from sensors and you try to make decisions how your robotic device is going to move. And that was so difficult to get your device from point A to point B. So I can't even imagine how much processing is on self-driving car. Like it does scare me. Like a single fault, you're basically off the road. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and the other thing when you look at it from the vulnerability perspective, even not just the logic perspective, you look at some of the talks that we saw today. There was the one which was the cost of complexity, which was RFCs being ambiguous around how technology should be developed, and then you've got developers who introduce the bugs anyway, but they they read these RFCs to implement like fundamental parts of how everything works, like your either your kernel or your TCP/IP stack. So in this case, in this particular presentation, it was analyzing like the TCP/IP stacks within 7 different implementations. Found 50% of them were vulnerable, and demonstrated a whole bunch of vulnerable DNS clients that, in theory, were could potentially be up to, I think it was 10 billion affected devices, but they said even if I think it was 1% of those, it'd be 100 million. It could be have remote code execution vulnerabilities in them. I think there was another talk around some of the, Pamela, you mentioned to me offline about some of the kernel vulnerabilities, and the fact that these still exist within systems. When you look at things like self-driving cars and they're internet connected and all this sort of stuff, just how, you look at the mobile broadcasting, how potentially, a broadcast could take down, every car on the road.
Yeah, and Ty, you mentioned, the kernel talk, and another talk I really enjoyed at the start of the day was the racing the dark and time of check, time of use bugs. And, it was a very good story of bugs across all 3 kernels from Windows, Mac, and Linux. And something really struck me, it's 2021 and we're still talking about some very basic bugs in unsafe memory languages like C, which is everywhere because it's, in libraries, and sometimes you might hack a web app and you don't know it's being passed to a C library. So we still have these terrible languages everywhere. But it really struck me with, Mark Dowd's wonderful book, The Art of Software Security Assessment, right, which is this big and full of amazing bugs. And it's still very relevant today. And it's still coming up in a lot of the top Black Hat research. And I found that very interesting. We're in 2021 and we're still hearing these. And Yu Wang, who spoke about that, he's had some very good quotes. And with the time of check, time of use bugs that he had found, he had some good takeaways, and he said all inputs are potentially harmful, and yes, that's true, right? And it just depends what you do with them. And he also had a brilliant takeaway with security updates don't always fix everything, and a lot of he's ended the talk with a smile where he goes, Apple have just patched my bug, and they emailed me on Monday asking if I can check the patch in beta before it goes to prod, and he's just smiling, going, I hope the patch fixed it. And he's a knowing smile. So I just thought, oh, that's great. He's well able to take patches apart and just not assume they fixed his report as well, and just keep the research going, which is wonderful.
Yeah, awesome.
That brings up another talk that kind of goes on the Microsoft is classic and it operates in kind of the same way and has just evolved and added and patched here and there. The gentleman that spoke about threat hunting and Active Directory kind of reinforced the fact that we're looking at the same methods of persistence over time. It's still trying to get scheduled tasks, recycling tokens, moving laterally and establishing footholds. It is good to remind yourself that these systems haven't evolved too much in the way that they operate at a core level. So I thought that talk really recapped all of the places you need to look for threat hunting, and how to weed out some of those more persistent threats that you might not see as noisy, on the outside, but they do require file system forensics or at least some sort of scan across the environment to see if that actual structure has been tampered with. So I thought that talk really summed that up well.
Yeah, well, it's a good insight into, one, just a recap, but also some of the industry trends and things like that as well. It sort of revamps some of those talks, or those topics. Theodore, did you have any thoughts on sort of some of the industry trends that you're seeing?
Yeah, there is another talk that I think was kind of interesting: mining and exploiting mobile payment credential leaks in the world. We just talked about the issues that been around for ages and they're still there. If we look at the state of modern Android applications, we just download like 200 apps. Probably half of them is going to have like credentials, API keys, API endpoint, like secret passwords in them. So while the talk itself is presented more like as an academic kind of dry talk, but the impact is significant. First of all, it's coming from a university in Hong Kong, so they mostly focused on payment apps that are popular here in Asia, and they don't talk openly what apps are impacted, but you could probably guess if you're familiar with what's popular, and the impact is crazy. Like even if like those apps that have like millions of users, like in China, have that kind of issues, yeah, the state of modern Android apps is not even close to be like perfect. So that would be like another interesting talk that like I definitely would point out.
Excellent. Sounds good. Some of the other things that I've personally been seeing in the industry, and I know that some of you guys have recently, is obviously around things like ransomware and the massive increase in security breaches. What are you guys seeing in that space?
I mean, we have a lot of ransomware cases and we see similar variants. We've gotten better at negotiating with certain threat actors, and others, we kind of peg them against a dollar amount. What is their usual asking price and how low can you negotiate that ransom down before they accept it or not? So it's becoming so prevalent that we have databases of this stuff that we're trying to become better investigators and ransom negotiators against. But at the same time, the effort that threat actors are putting out, I think, is decreasing a bit. I think they're much more organized. They have, tactics, strategies, playbooks, but the amount of time they're investing per attack is decreased because they're trying to just maximize profit. Similar to any other industry, I think organized ransomware is competitive now. So you have different groups who are running the same deal. So you see a bit more data exfiltration and the threat of publishing that data, and I see a little less smash and grab destructive type ransomware. Like several systems can be restored at the end of it. It's that threat of publication. What are you guys seeing?
So my take on ransomware is that there were many criminal groups operating out of like Eastern Europe and other regions, but since I'm being Russian, I'm more familiar with what's going on out of Eastern Europe. And ransomware is the type of crime that has much less risk of being caught while it generates significant profits. Think of it in the past. If you break into a bank account and you steal money and then you wire money to your own bank account or to your money move bank account, there is still a money move line that basically could lead to the capture of you as a criminal. While if you're doing ransomware, you get paid, you break into a network, you get paid in Bitcoins. It's perfect anonymity. So it's very low risk level crime that just gives you a lot of money. And the insurance systems where like many companies can actually claim the money that they pay to the ransomware criminals as a part of their like insurance package is simply make it even worse. Like many companies not even willing to spend effort in protecting the network because they buy insurance. So if they get broken into, insurance just pays, and that benefits everyone except for maybe poor system administrators who have to fix the whole thing. And the ransomware threat actors, they just like, they went from the high profile like company like business operations to like pop and mom kind of ransomware shops where they just use 7-zip to pack your files and leave your text file asking for money.
Yeah, well, that was the recent QLocker attacking the QNAPs, right?
Yeah, that is. It's like it's a shell script, and if you do PS, you could actually see a password. If you're lucky enough to catch them in a process, you can actually see a password they're using inside the script. So, yeah, crazy.
Yeah, and that comes down to what Mika was saying about how, you know, the actual effort going into them is going down in some cases. And, you know, I've seen the same sort of thing. We had last year we had the Australian national cyber attacks going on, and they were dubbed the copy and paste attacks because as they were, you know, these, as you say, 100% agree with you, they were far from sophisticated, but they were very organized, you know, so they would get in and they would move through the network relatively quickly, but they were using all open source tools, you know, just straight from GitHub or wherever, down to the point where, you know, they were using the Telerik exploit to break into some Windows systems. And, you know, like that creates some temporary DLLs and those sort of things. And they didn't even change the names of like the DLLs to try and bypass anything. They didn't care. They just went straight in, sort of broke in and just...
Yeah, living off the land. And there is one reason why, like as a criminal, why you would like to use the open source and off-shelf tools vs building your own, because it makes attribution very hard. Like even if you get arrested, there is no proof that a particular case was behind you because everyone is using those open source tools, right? So
yeah,
that's the thing. And they, from what I've seen, they even pay software licenses for offensive tools. So they, like from the software usage perspective, they're not even pirating software. They're using like licensed Cobalt Strike and like all of those tools. Yeah.
PS
they have money for that.
Yeah. Me cats.
And I have to say, poor Cobalt Strike, because they don't often pay for the license either. So, you know, it's a fantastic tool, and it just proves how good it is when, you know, the bad people are using it too, right? So.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a huge amount of CNC using it. Yeah. One of the things that you brought up was around sort of extortion. What do you like? When I've sort of what we've sort of seen, and exactly what you've said, is around you know, an increase in ransomware, but we've seen it shift more to infiltrations and then mass scale encryption of entire organizations. You know, multinational organizations that just shuts the entire business down in an instant. But then it's also then moving into extortion and ransomware and getting that combination of stealing the data, extorting you. I find it a little bit interesting to see, like when you get ransomware and not being extorted, and I'm keen to hear your thoughts, Mika, on this. I think there's a balance between the sweet spot for an attacker from a return on investment or the likelihood of someone paying a ransom, where, you know, if you just get ransomware and, you know, you have to pay a ransom to get your files back, right? there's a pretty good, like if you're in a corner and you don't have your backups, and we had a client with that where their IT guy turned around and said, hey, I forgot to tell you that your backups haven't been working for 6 months. And that put them in a position where they had no choice but to pay. You know, there's a pretty good chance you're going to get a good majority of your files back, and if you pay it. So I think that's to me is a sweet spot of, you know, from the attacker's perspective of getting revenue. When they steal the data and they're threatening to release it, or I mean, we even had one recently where every day they leaked the data to another client and another client and another client until they you know, were going to pay. I just think at that point, you know, one, they've destroyed any trust. I mean, it's funny with ransomware, you sort of have a level of trust that you're going to get the decryption key, right? When you're dealing with extortion, I just find it really difficult that you could pay it unless you're really in a corner, because at that point you're lost. I'm keen to hear your thoughts on that, especially as you were talking about negotiating with the threat actors and negotiating them down, and how do you actually approach those negotiations, and your thoughts on sort of that sweet spot of return on investment for attackers.
Well, there is that great book that's Never Split the Difference. It's about hostage negotiations, and a lot of the same tactics apply, where you try to put as much time in between that initial ask and any type of action on your end, because you're buying time for the client to see what is the status of the backup, how much data can they get back, and what's absolutely critical to move forward. So the first thing you want to do is just buy time, and like you said, Ty, hopefully they're backing up and have something decent to restore. In terms of if they've exfiltrated data and have kind of shown you at least snippets or can prove that they've leaked it, I never think that you can trust them not to publish it. I forget who exactly.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah. So if it's more so about your critical data being lost and it, you know, impacting business hugely, then you might actually need to consider negotiation. And then you have the proof of life period where you're finding files that you need them to prove that the decryption key works. It's a long drawn out process, and it can actually take longer than you'd think. It's not simple. And then once you might get the key, it takes weeks. You know, depends on how many systems you need to restore. I think it's best to deal with it. You know, Fyodor, I know you're not pro insurance, but they do run checks against your security before writing a policy, and it is complicated. They have these formulas for how to underwrite certain risks, and we kind of step in and just, you know, as responders who work with insurers, kind of say, oh, exposed RDP, I would maybe ask them to patch that before signing a ransomware policy. But it's really interesting, and I think it'll continue to evolve. They're trying to, you know, attackers are trying to pressure the victim to pay as quickly as possible, and the best thing you can do is put as much time as possible in between actions and conversations.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, and I think it's interesting that you say that, you know, if they're showing proof of data, then you can't trust them to you know, not release it. I know that in your presentation, you were talking about researchers and the risk to them. You know, some of the investigations we've done, you know, the researchers quite often show the data. And, you know, at that point, the client's like, well, I can't trust this guy because he just showed me my own data, right? So it's a really difficult position, which is what you were sort of talking about in your presentation today, and you know, around how to.
Troy Hunt finds his own data in the leaks that he gets.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, exactly. And you know, he mentioned with the example where he showed his daughter's watch getting hacked and releasing getting random phone calls through it by arbitrary people. How him releasing that and working with the vendor to sort of disclose that to him, he just found that was quite risky as well. And yeah, there's a lot of concern in that space. So one last question, just from the chat. So should the ransomware victims actually pay ransom? And then we'll wrap up.
Depends on what your objective is. Like if you really want your files back, yes, but you basically you funneling money into the criminal economy. I think the whole reason why ransomware ops are so rampant is because people pay. If no one pays for the ransom, there would be no business of ransom.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, well, I think that's all the time we've got for today. That's a really good overview and really good insights from the review board, so thank you very much. Thank you to all the delegates who attended Blackhat today, as well as all of the speakers for all of the research that they did and the great presentations that they delivered. It's been a really good first day of Blackhat Asia 2021, and look forward to the next round. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you.